Picture this. It's 11 p.m. on a Sunday night, and you're sitting in front of your computer with that familiar knot in your stomach. The presentation that's due tomorrow morning stares back at you from a completely blank document. The cursor blinks mockingly, almost rhythmically, like it's counting down the hours you've lost. But here's the weird part. You haven't been idle. Oh no. In the past 6 hours, you've somehow managed to reorganize your entire bookshelf by color and author, watched 3 different TikTok compilations about productivity tips, researched whether you really need that expensive espresso machine you've been eyeing, cleaned out your email inbox from 2019, and even learned how to fold fitted sheets properly on YouTube. You've been incredibly productive at everything, except the one thing that actually matters. Sound familiar? If you're nodding your head right now, welcome to the club that nobody wants to be in, but somehow has millions of members worldwide. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not fundamentally flawed as a human being. What you're experiencing has a name, a complex science behind it, and most importantly, proven solutions that actually work when you understand the real mechanics of what's happening in your brain. Here's the thing about procrastination that nobody tells you, and it's going to change how you see yourself forever. It's not really about poor time management. It's not about lacking discipline or willpower. It's definitely not about being lazy. What's really happening is that your brain is literally hijacking your best intentions, and it's doing this for reasons that made perfect sense about 50,000 years ago, but are completely counterproductive in our modern world. Think about it this way. Have you ever wondered why you can binge watch an entire Netflix series for 8 hours straight, completely absorbed, never once checking your phone or getting distracted, but you can't seem to focus on writing that important email for more than 5 minutes? Your attention span isn't broken. Your brain isn't defective. What's happening is that these two activities are triggering completely different neurological pathways. It all comes down to something called dopamine, and this is where things get really fascinating. Dopamine isn't just the pleasure chemical like most people think. It's actually your brain's motivational engine, your internal GPS system for deciding what's worth your time and energy. When you're procrastinating, your brain is essentially running a continuous cost-benefit analysis and saying, hey, let's do something that gives us an instant hit of pleasure and accomplishment instead of waiting for that distant, uncertain reward. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, and this might completely change how you think about procrastination. Some people, researchers call them active procrastinators, actually thrive under pressure. These aren't people who are failing at life or struggling with self-control. They're operating on a completely different neurological system. Their dopamine levels can spike up to 9 times higher as deadlines approach, creating an almost superhuman state of focus and creativity. They're not procrastinating because they're broken. They're procrastinating because their brains have learned that this pattern actually produces better results for them. Meanwhile, there are passive procrastinators, people who delay tasks and then struggle under pressure, often producing work that doesn't meet their own standards. Understanding which type you are isn't about judgment. It's about working with your brain instead of against it. Now let me blow your mind for a second with some research that will completely reframe how you see your struggles with procrastination. Your tendency to procrastinate isn't a character flaw or a sign of moral weakness. It's literally written into your DNA. Scientists have discovered that procrastination is moderately heritable, meaning it runs in families just like height or eye color. But here's the real kicker. Procrastination shares complete genetic overlap with impulsivity. Read that again. The exact same genes that influence how impulsive you are also determine how likely you are to procrastinate. There are no unique genetic influences on procrastination that are separate from impulsivity. What does this mean? Well, from an evolutionary perspective, impulsivity was actually a survival advantage. Your ancestors, who could quickly grab immediate rewards in uncertain, dangerous environments, were the ones who survived famines, predators, and natural disasters. The ability to focus intensely on immediate pleasures and rewards kept them alive. Fast forward to today, and those same genetic gifts are making you choose Instagram over that important presentation. Your brain literally hasn't caught up to modern life. You're carrying around Stone Age wiring in a digital age world, and that's creating some serious conflicts. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening inside your head every time you sit down to do something important. You've got two major systems competing for control. First, there's your prefrontal cortex. Let's call this system future you. This is the part of your brain that can think abstractly, plan for the future, consider long-term consequences, and make rational decisions based on your values and goals. Future you is the one who sets alarms, makes to-do lists, and genuinely wants to succeed. But then you've got your limbic system. Let's call this present you. This ancient part of your brain is incredibly powerful and operates on one simple principle: seek pleasure, avoid pain, right now. Present you doesn't care about your career goals or your reputation. Present you just knows that scrolling through social media feels good immediately, while working on that report feels uncomfortable and offers no immediate reward. When you sit down to work, these two systems literally battle for control. And here's the unfair part. Present. You has some serious advantages. The limbic system is faster, more emotionally powerful, and it has direct access to your body's stress response system. When present you perceives a task as threatening, boring, or uncomfortable, it can flood your system with stress hormones that make you feel physically uncomfortable until you escape to something more pleasant. And stress? Well, stress is making everything worse, but not in the way you might think. Moderate stress can actually boost motivation and performance. When your brain perceives an appropriate level of challenge, it releases chemicals that increase focus, energy, and drive. This is why some people do their best work under pressure. But when stress becomes overwhelming, and let's be honest, in our always connected, always demanding world, it often does, your brain switches into full threat mode. Suddenly, that important task doesn't just feel boring or difficult, it feels dangerous. Your ancient survival circuits activate, and your brain's solution is elegantly simple: avoid, avoid, avoid. This is why procrastination often feels so emotionally charged. It's not just about the task itself, it's about your brain's primitive alarm system screaming that something is wrong and you need to escape immediately. But what if I told you that understanding this neurological battle happening in your brain is actually the key to winning it? What if, instead of fighting against your brain's natural tendencies, you could learn to work with them? This is where science gets really exciting, because researchers have actually figured out a mathematical formula for motivation. It's called temporal motivation theory, and it looks like this: motivation equals expectancy times value, divided by 1 plus impulsiveness times delay. Now, before your eyes glaze over at the math, let me translate this into plain English, because this formula is literally the key to unlocking your productivity. You're more motivated when 4 things align. You believe you can succeed at the task. The task matters to you personally. You're not easily distracted by other options, and the reward feels close in time. Think about the last time you felt incredibly motivated to do something. Maybe it was planning a vacation you were excited about, or working on a project you were passionate about, or even cleaning your house when you knew someone important was coming over. In each case, all four variables were working in your favor. You knew you could do it, it mattered to you, you weren't thinking about other options, and you could see the immediate result. The magic happens when you stop trying to force motivation and start systematically manipulating these variables. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, you can engineer motivation by changing the conditions. This is revolutionary because it means motivation isn't some mysterious force that randomly comes and goes. It's predictable, it's manageable, and most importantly, it's learnable. So how do you actually hack your own brain? How do you take these scientific insights and turn them into real-world results? Let's start with something you probably haven't considered as crucial to your productivity: your environment. Your workspace isn't neutral territory. It's either actively working for you or actively working against you. And most people have no idea how much their environment is sabotaging their best efforts. Clutter isn't just messy, it creates something called cognitive overload. When your brain has to constantly process visual chaos, it uses up mental energy that should be going toward your actual work. It's like trying to have a conversation in a noisy restaurant. You can do it, but it's exhausting. Poor lighting doesn't just strain your eyes, it literally saps your mental energy and reduces the production of neurotransmitters that keep you alert and focused. Distractions aren't just annoying, they're literally rewiring your brain to crave easy dopamine hits instead of the satisfaction that comes from deep, focused work. But here's the incredible part. Flip the script on your environment, and the results are dramatic. Natural light doesn't just feel nice, it regulates your circadian rhythms and boosts the production of serotonin, which improves both mood and focus. An organized, personalized workspace doesn't just look professional, it reduces cognitive load and increases your sense of control and ownership over your work. Remove distractions, and your brain can finally settle into the deep focus states that make challenging work feel engaging instead of overwhelming. Research shows that a well-designed workspace can increase productivity by 20 to 30%. That's not a small improvement. That's the difference between struggling through your day and feeling genuinely accomplished. Now let's talk about habits, because this is where most people get productivity completely wrong. The most successful people in the world don't rely on motivation, they rely on automation. They've figured out how to make productive behaviors so automatic that they don't have to constantly make decisions about whether or not to do them. When you turn productive behaviors into habits, you're essentially programming your brain to bypass the whole "should I or shouldn't I" internal debate that drains so much mental energy. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up each morning and have an internal struggle about whether you feel motivated to practice good dental hygiene. You just do it, automatically, because it's wired into your routine. The key is starting impossibly small. I'm talking micro habits so tiny they feel almost ridiculous. One push-up, opening a document, writing one sentence, reading one page. The goal isn't to accomplish a lot right away. The goal is to prove to your brain that you can succeed consistently. Your brain needs evidence that you're capable of following through before it will release the motivation and focus you need for bigger challenges. Here's what happens neurologically when you build habits. Your brain literally creates new neural pathways that make the behavior more automatic and less effortful over time. Every time you repeat a behavior in the same context, you strengthen these pathways. Eventually, the behavior becomes so automatic that not doing it feels uncomfortable. But there's a specific technique that can accelerate this process dramatically, and it's called implementation intentions. Instead of vague goals like, I'll work on my project tomorrow, you create specific if-then plans. If it's 9 a.m. and I'm at my desk, then I'll open my laptop and work for 25 minutes. This simple shift in how you think about your goals increases your success rate from about 65% to an astounding 95% when combined with accountability. Why is this so powerful? Because it removes decision-making from the equation. When 9 a.m. arrives and you're at your desk, you don't have to decide whether you feel like working. You just follow the plan. You've essentially created a program response that bypasses all the mental negotiation that usually leads to procrastination. Speaking of technique, let me tell you about something that might sound simple, but is actually backed by decades of research: the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes of focused work followed by a 5-minute break. On the surface, this seems almost too basic to work. But here's why it's so effective from a neurological standpoint. First, it creates artificial urgency. When you know you only have 25 minutes to work on something, your brain shifts into a different mode. The deadline, even though it's self-imposed, triggers the same motivational systems that make you productive when you have real deadlines. Second, it makes tasks feel manageable. Instead of thinking, I have to write this entire report, you think, I just have to work on this report for 25 minutes. That shift in framing dramatically reduces the resistance your brain creates around starting. Third, it provides frequent rewards. Every 25 minutes, you get a break. Every 4 cycles, you get a longer break. Your dopamine system, which craves regular reinforcement, gets fed consistently instead of having to wait hours or days for satisfaction. It's like tricking your brain into cooperation by speaking its language: short bursts, clear endings, and regular rewards. But perhaps the most powerful tool in your anti-procrastination arsenal is something that might surprise you: self-compassion. This isn't just feel-good psychology. This is hard neuroscience. Research consistently shows that people who treat themselves with kindness after setbacks recover faster, try harder on subsequent attempts, and maintain motivation longer than people who engage in self-criticism. Here's what happens in your brain when you beat yourself up after procrastinating. You activate the same neural circuits involved in physical pain and threat detection. Your brain literally interprets self-criticism as an attack, which triggers defensive responses that make you want to avoid the situation entirely. Self-criticism doesn't motivate you. It makes you want to hide. But when you respond to setbacks with self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend, you activate neural circuits associated with safety, care, and resilience. This isn't about making excuses or lowering standards. It's about maintaining the emotional energy and psychological safety needed to keep trying. Self-compassion also helps you see setbacks as information rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Instead of, I'm terrible at this and I'll never succeed, you think, that didn't work out as planned. What can I learn from this? What will I try differently next time? Now let's get really tactical and dive into some specific strategies that you can start implementing immediately. These aren't just productivity tips. They're scientifically backed interventions that target the underlying neurological and psychological mechanisms driving procrastination. First, let's talk about accountability, because this is one of the most underestimated tools in behavior change. When you share your goals with someone and commit to regular check-ins, you're not just adding social pressure, you're fundamentally changing how your brain calculates the cost of not following through. Here's the research. When you simply write down a goal, you have about a 42% chance of achieving it. When you share that goal with someone, your success rate jumps to 65%. But when you have regular accountability check-ins with that person, your success rate skyrockets to 95%. Why is accountability so powerful? Because humans are fundamentally social creatures, and our brains are wired to care deeply about our reputation and relationships. When you know someone is going to ask you about your progress, your brain has to consider not just the personal consequences of procrastination, but the social consequences as well. Suddenly, the cost-benefit analysis that your brain is constantly running shifts dramatically in favor of taking action. But accountability works best when it's structured properly. Random check-ins with friends who might forget to ask aren't nearly as effective as scheduled. Specific accountability with someone who understands your goals and cares about your success. The best accountability partners ask specific questions, celebrate your wins, help you problem-solve obstacles, and maintain consistent contact. Now here's something that might sound completely unrelated to productivity, but is actually one of the most powerful motivation boosters available: cold exposure. Yes, I'm talking about cold showers, ice baths, or even just washing your face with cold water. Before you roll your eyes, let me explain the science behind this. When you expose yourself to cold water, several remarkable things happen in your brain. Your dopamine levels can increase by up to 250%, and this elevation lasts for hours after the cold exposure ends. Your norepinephrine levels also spike dramatically, which enhances alertness, focus, and energy. You get a natural release of endorphins that creates a sense of accomplishment and well-being. And perhaps most importantly, you prove to yourself that you can do difficult things, which builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to handle challenges. This isn't just about the immediate biochemical effects, though those are significant. Cold exposure is a form of deliberate discomfort that trains your brain to associate challenging experiences with positive outcomes. Every time you choose the cold shower over the warm one, you're strengthening the neural pathways that help you choose difficult but rewarding tasks over easy but ultimately unsatisfying ones. For the technology enthusiasts among you, there are some incredibly sophisticated tools available that can support your anti-procrastination efforts. Apps like Forest gamify the experience of staying focused by growing virtual trees that die if you leave the app to check social media. Tools like Freedom and Cold Turkey block distracting websites and apps during designated work periods. Rescue Time tracks how you actually spend your time on devices, giving you objective data about your habits rather than relying on often inaccurate self-reporting. But here's the key with any technological solution. The best app is the one you actually use consistently. Don't get caught up in optimizing your productivity system instead of actually being productive. Choose tools that integrate seamlessly into your existing routine and that genuinely reduce friction rather than adding complexity. Some people benefit enormously from brain training apps and neurofeedback tools that help you develop better attention regulation and emotional control. While the research on these tools is still evolving, early studies suggest that they can be particularly helpful for people who struggle with attention regulation or have high levels of impulsivity. The most important thing to understand about any tool or technique is that it needs to fit your specific situation, personality, and goals. What works brilliantly for one person might feel forced or unnatural for another. The key is to experiment systematically, give each approach enough time to work, and pay attention to what actually produces results in your life rather than what sounds good in theory. Here's what's really happening when you successfully implement these strategies. You're not just changing behaviors on the surface, you're literally rewiring your brain at the neurological level. Every time you choose the harder but more meaningful task over the easier but less important one, you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex's ability to override impulses from your limbic system. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new neural connections throughout your life, means that procrastination patterns that feel deeply ingrained can actually be changed. The same neural flexibility that created your procrastination habits in the first place can create new, more productive patterns. But here's what most people don't understand about brain change. It happens in layers, and each layer requires different strategies. At the most basic level, you're changing behaviors, what you actually do with your time. At a deeper level, you're changing thought patterns, how you talk to yourself about tasks, setbacks, and your own capabilities. At an even deeper level, you're changing emotional responses, how you feel when faced with challenging or uncomfortable situations. And at the deepest level, you're changing your identity, how you see yourself and what you believe you're capable of. The research shows that successful, lasting behavior change happens when you address multiple levels simultaneously. It's not enough to just change what you do. You also need to change how you think and feel about what you do. This is why purely behavioral approaches often fail in the long term, and it's why purely motivational approaches fail in the short term. The most effective interventions combine practical behavior change strategies with cognitive techniques that help you think more effectively about your goals and challenges, emotional regulation skills that help you tolerate discomfort and setbacks, and identity work that helps you see yourself as the kind of person who follows through on commitments. Environmental changes support behavioral changes. Habit formation supports consistent action, even when motivation is low. Cognitive techniques support better decision-making and problem-solving. Emotional regulation supports persistence through difficulties. Social accountability supports motivation and provides external structure. And self-compassion supports recovery from setbacks and maintains long-term resilience. When these elements work together, they create what researchers call a virtuous cycle. Each positive change makes the next positive change easier. Each success builds confidence that supports future success. Each new habit creates mental space and energy for developing additional habits. This is why people who successfully overcome chronic procrastination often report that the changes feel almost effortless after a certain point. They're not using more willpower or trying harder. They're working within a system that supports their goals instead of fighting against their natural tendencies. Remember that person sitting at 11 p.m. on Sunday night, staring at a blank document with a growing sense of panic and self-recrimination. That person represents millions of people who are trapped in patterns that feel impossible to change. But that doesn't have to be your story anymore, because now you understand the truth that changes everything. Procrastination isn't a character flaw or a sign of moral weakness. It's a mismatch between your ancient brain and modern demands. It's a natural response to tasks that trigger your threat detection systems. It's often a sign that you're facing challenges that matter to you, but feel overwhelming or unclear. More importantly, you now have a toolkit of scientifically backed strategies that work with your brain instead of against it. environmental design that supports focus and reduces decision fatigue, habit formation techniques that make productive behaviors automatic, implementation intentions that bypass the need for constant motivation, accountability systems that leverage your social nature, self-compassion practices that maintain emotional resilience, and an understanding of your own neurological patterns that allows you to work with your strengths instead of constantly fighting your weaknesses. Your brain is incredibly adaptable. The same neuroplasticity that created your current procrastination patterns can create new patterns based on different choices and different responses to challenges. Every small action you take is literally reshaping your neural networks, making the next right choice a little bit easier, a little more automatic, a little more natural. This process isn't always linear, and it's rarely quick. Real behavior change happens gradually, with setbacks and plateaus and breakthrough moments. But every time you choose to start a task when you don't feel like it, every time you show yourself compassion after a setback, every time you modify your environment to support your goals, you're not just completing a task or fixing a problem. You're training your brain. You're proving to yourself that change is possible. You're writing a new story about who you are and what you're capable of. The research is clear. People can and do overcome even severe, chronic procrastination when they understand what they're dealing with and apply the right strategies consistently. The same genetic factors that predispose you to procrastination also often come with strengths like creativity, adaptability, and the ability to perform under pressure. The same brain that creates procrastination patterns can learn to create productivity patterns. So tomorrow, when you sit down to work, remember that you're not just trying to get something done. You're participating in one of the most remarkable processes in nature, the deliberate reshaping of your own brain through conscious choice and repeated action. You're proving that humans can transcend their initial programming through understanding, strategy, and persistence. The question isn't whether you can overcome procrastination. The science proves that you can. The strategies exist, they're accessible, and they work when applied consistently. The question is, are you ready to start today? Are you ready to be patient with the process while being persistent with the practices? Are you ready to treat yourself with compassion while holding yourself accountable to your goals? Your future self, the one who sits down to work and actually enjoys the process, who starts tasks early and finishes them with satisfaction, who has learned to work with their brain instead of against it. That person is not a fantasy. That person is the natural result of applying what you now know, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one small victory at a time. The only question left is, when do you start?